Good evening. I'm Lady Nopeingham. Tonight, I have 4 tales of fiction for you, all about dreams, or nightmares, depending on your interpretation. I personally find dreams fascinating, as I am plagued, or gifted, again depending on how you see it, with dreams that are all manner of strange, horrific, grandiose, and just plain bizarre. I'd love to hear all about your craziest or scariest dreams, so please share in the comments below. Please also be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep the stories coming. I'm well on my way to my first 50 subscribers, and I would absolutely love to reach that goal by the time Halloween rolls around. But for now, let's just get into the stories. Have a safe and dream-filled night, everyone. The Stuff of Which Dreams Are Made by Elizabeth Fenley. The morning after the dream, I went to see Sylvie. She was setting up her shop for the day, the kind that sells aromatherapy, crystals, dream catchers, ritual athames, stuff like that. She was behind the counter rearranging displays with swoops of her flowing, gauzy purple sleeves, bangles on her wrists reverberating like wind chimes through the glass door. I could hear her humming to herself. Even though the sign said, "We are currently closed. The universe will open for you when it is ready," I pressed my face to the glass, cupping my hands around it. Without looking up, Sylvie whisked the door open, then closed and relocked it behind me without moving from behind the counter. "Good morning, Noreen," she said, still not looking up from the lower display case she was rearranging. "Hi, Sylvie. Sorry to bother you before you open." "No bother, Noreen, dear. I expected you." Her voice was dulcet, feather-like, sweeping across my skin. "Of course you did. If I was like her, I would have seen that coming." "Had another dream." It wasn't a question. She already knew that. "Come through," she instructed, leading me through the curtained doorway to her private consultation space. I sat in my regular seat, clutching the drawing I had brought. Silently, she held out her hand for it before sliding gracefully into her chair. I always felt so clunky, so earthbound, so overly solid around her, practical, sensible, like orthopedic shoes. Sylvie studied the sketch briefly. "A chimera. Nu is his name." "You know his name?" Of course she did. Stupid stuff always came tripping out of my mouth around her. It didn't seem to bother her. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen anything disturb Sylvie's serenity. I lacked the serenity and grace genes, I suppose. My little sister got them instead. I've always resented that. The crudely scribbled figure I had scratched out with the side edge of a dull pencil on the back of a bill had a grotesque grin, stretching its monkey's face out, not unlike the Cheshire cat. Huge black, unblinking eyes, furry legs and paws striped like a tiger, some weird wavy pattern on its body, and a long, undulating, deadly-looking snake tail. Nu frequently appears in dreams. Why? I'm guessing it's not a good thing. He is a harbinger of sickness and misfortune. Pretty much nothing after harbinger is a good thing. Sylvie smiled gently, her silver blue eyes bright, her skin uncreased by time. Harbingers just are. Judgment of what they bring is open to interpretation. Sickness and misfortune are open to interpretation? If they are not directed at you, what if they are intended for terrorists, or serial killers, or pedophiles? I considered that for a moment. Sure, but why give me the nightmare? Why not send it straight to the target, the bad person? Why do I have to see these things? I don't want to see. I cannot tell you that, Noreen. You seem to be open to these messages. And you can't close me, right? She'd told me that before, but I had kept hoping. She shook her head. What did Nu show you?" I closed my eyes and rubbed my hands over them, like I was trying to erase the images of the dream. If only it were that simple. He opened a door to a room I'd never seen before. The only thing in the room was a bed, a huge bed, like filling up the whole wall. Sylvie nodded encouragingly. I swallowed hard and continued. There was a dead body on the bed, not like a skeleton, but rotting and maggots and skin peeled off. Looked like a man. All around him and on him and through him were dozens of snakes. They were weaving in and out between his ribs, in his mouth, and out where his eyes should have been. What color were the snakes? Black mostly. Some had red parts, maybe some gray or dull silver, but nothing pretty. What else? Around the edges of the snakes, like a picture frame or a fence that they all stayed inside, were white lilies. White lilies with perfect drops of blood on them, and I could smell them. I hate lilies. They have that sickly sweet smell that always gives me a headache. But the lilies and the rotting corpse, I could smell them together, all mixed. I threw up. That's how I woke up, leaning over the side of my bed, puking on the floor, on my slippers. I had to throw them away in the garbage can outside, from the smell. I shuddered at the memory and pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to keep myself from being sick again. My vomit smelled like the room. Lilies and death. How is that even possible? Sylvie shrugged slightly. It's possible because it happened, Noreen. It just is because it is. I sighed, breathing back the nausea. So this is the part where you tell me what this means. She laughed, a light, fluttery sound. I knew it couldn't just be that simple. I can do a reading for you. She pulled out the familiar, well-used tarot cards. She placed the cards on the table for me to cut. She flipped over the one on top where I had divided the deck. The Empress, the 5 of Cups inverted, the Page of Rods inverted, the 4 of Swords, and finally the Queen of Pentacles inverted. She studied them silently, her face neutral. What? It's bad, isn't it? Of course, it has to be bad. Oh, wait. You're going to say it just is, right? Sylvie smiled. They're your cards, Noreen. We have here the power of the earth force, its bounty and abundance, with a reunion spoiled by deception, and illness through neglect, perhaps even intentional. Oh God, I'm dying. It's a death dream. I knew it. She placed her soft, cool hand over mine. You were not on the bed. It was a man. The illness was his, the snakes and lilies and blood, all from the bounty of the earth. The reunion could have been yours with him, or you simply witnessing the aftermath of another's. You should not jump right into the personal, the worst outcome. Nu is not known for his kindness or helpfulness. It is likely he enjoyed showing you these things because they would upset you. Charming. What a nice guy. So what do I do now? What am I supposed to do now that I know? Now that I've seen that? What did you feel like you were pulled to do after the dream? Throw up, brush my teeth a dozen times, and use half a bottle of mouthwash? Then come to see you. Sylvie raised her hands, palms up, above the table. There you are. You have done what the dream intended you to do. I sat, stunned, staring. So that's it? For now, come and see me again tomorrow morning. At the moment, I have someone at the door who needs me. She rose and disappeared through the curtains. Goodbye, Noreen. I will see you tomorrow, floating behind her as she went. Great. That helped 0%, I sighed and rubbed my tired, stinging eyes as I left through the back. That night, sure enough, Nu came back. This time I knew his name, even in the dream, but I couldn't speak, which was too bad because I really wanted to tell him off and teach him some colorful vocabulary words that freaky, dream, monkey, tiger, snake harbingers don't know. He seemed to know, staring at me with his creepy, bottomless black eyes. He took me to an abandoned amusement park, not one that I know, just your typical kind, except that the banners and decorations were wet, ripped, falling, clown figures knocked over, their red noses rolled away somewhere. Cobwebs caught on my face and in my hair everywhere we walked. Then, inexplicably, in the middle of the park, was a huge, ornate grandfather clock with a fading sun face and a sleepy moon face, eyes closed, under delicate filigreed hands. New grinned and made a chittering sound like nails on an old-fashioned chalkboard as he touched the clock with a tiger-striped paw. The clock began to run, backwards. Then, one at a time, the rides started up, roller coasters traveling backward, the Ferris wheel spinning on its side, the rafts going up the steep waterless flume ride. Huge animated clowns opening and closing their mouths above the funhouse of distorting mirrors where a silver disco ball began to spin, projecting hundreds of light-reflected eyes in the dark tunnel. The rumbling of the machinery began to vibrate deep within the concrete below my feet. A crack split open near my feet, pulled open into an oval, and helplessly I fell, landing on the floor beside my bed, right where I had thrown up the night before. Good thing I had cleaned it up. Time, Sylvie told me simply. Time, that's it. No looking at the cards, no peering into the scrying bowl, no seeing. Just time, Noreen. Even the cobwebs are symbols of time. But everything was going backwards, starting with the clock. She nodded. Time is out of joint, O cursed spite, that ere I was born to set it right, she quoted. Great. Shakespeare, as inscrutable as new and backwards time. To distract myself, I went to my favorite consignment store, the Red Collection. It had antique furniture, paintings, clothes, toys, knickknacks, you name it. There was a different inventory on a constantly rotating basis. I tried to go every month. Sometimes I bought something, sometimes I just spent an hour wandering around, looking at things, at people, guessing why this person or the other was buying what they held. It was always a good distraction, like wandering through jumbled remnants of hundreds of other people's lives. Until it wasn't. In the corner behind the 3-tiered shelves, the kind that you had to get someone to help you with, even though I could never find anyone to help me with anything, I saw it. I saw me. I saw a painting, a portrait. It looked just like me. I actually thought it was a mirror at first, until I realized that it was wearing black Victorian dress, with a high buttoned-up neck and puffy sleeves, hair pulled back into a severe, unforgiving bun. It had no eyes. Not like someone had cut out the canvas to remove the eyes, just a face missing the eyes, fused skin over where the eyes should have been. My eyebrows were there, in the exact shape I plucked them into. Then my face just sloped into cheekbone and nose, like that was the normal way a face should look. I actually pressed my fingers to my eyes to reassure myself that they were still there, blinked a lot, and felt really stupid because obviously I had eyes if I could see. After several people bumped into me without apologizing, I tore myself away from myself and hurried to my car. A nice warm shower would make me feel better, and my comfy sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt with an emoji winking and sticking its tongue out, which always made me smile. Dressed, feet in fluffy socks, I looked into the mirror so that I could see myself imitate the emoji and smile, even laugh. But I had no eyes. My reflection in the mirror had no eyes. I raised my hands to touch my eyes, run my fingers over my eyelashes. My reflection mimicked my motion, but its fingers found only skin. I could still feel my eyes. It had to be another nightmare. I looked around for New, but he wasn't there. Maybe I just didn't need him for this one. I must have just crashed on the couch when I got home, from the stress and sleeplessness following the nightmares. That made sense. Just another nightmare. My worst nightmare. But it would end and I would go back to see Sylvie. I sat down on my bed to wait for something to happen. New didn't appear. No other grotesque images appeared. I got up again and again to look in the mirror. Still no eyes. That's such a weird thing to have to think. I waited and waited. I checked the time on my phone, my alarm clock, the microwave. Time had stopped. I'm not waking up, or I'm not asleep. This is my worst nightmare. There's Always a Cassandra by Elizabeth Fenley. He always apologizes, the Babadook whose name he told me is Enzos, for bringing me the dreams. I ask why he has to bring the dreams at all, and why bring them to me. He says solemnly, "You are now the Cassandra. There must always be one." He stares at me with vacant eye sockets, his skeletal face stretched tight with thin-sheeted, rubbery pale skin. His black top hat, worn, crumpled, dusty though it is, gives him an air of dignity, of reserved poise, even grace. When his long, skinless, boned fingers stretch to remove the hat, the nightmare begins. I write them down when I wake up from them, sweating, panicked, in the middle of the night or by the screech of my unforgiving alarm clock. I've heard anyone with especially vivid dreams should keep a dream journal, and then you could look back at your dreams and decipher the symbolism found in them. Only my dreams aren't symbolic. They are foretellings. The people are real. The events are real. My neighbor's mother fell on the icy front steps of the house while I was having a snowball fight with my boyfriend. The ambulance took her away. Patrick couldn't understand why I was so upset. I pulled him inside, shaking off snow and ice. I showed him the entry in the journal from 2 nights before. It was identical. I remember the image. Watching it happen in real life was like déjà vu. If I hadn't written it down, I would have shaken it off as a brain malfunction, short-term memory accidentally rerouted to long-term memory. Patrick read it, skimmed it really, and then looked up at me, shaking his head. "It's just a coincidence. You knew there would be snow. You must have heard your neighbor telling your mom about the visit." "No, I didn't. She didn't." "This says she died in your dream. She didn't die, so it's nothing. Just your subconscious processing shit you haven't gotten around to. Nothing to worry about. Did I tell you about that time I dreamed?" He told me about his weirdest dreams and a few nightmares from his childhood, mostly about monsters, snakes in his bed, getting trapped in a closet full of spiders, while we sat by the fire drinking hot chocolate. I listened, dropping little marshmallows in and stirring them around, watching them congeal and melt, sipping the froth off the top and then adding more. The next morning, my dad told me that Mrs. Matresse's mother died before they got to the hospital. We all signed a card for the flowers my mother took over, with a turkey tetrazzini. I texted Patrick when I heard, but he told me not to be all caught up in the dream. My own boyfriend wouldn't even try to believe me. I didn't tell anyone else. After the 5th dream about someone dying, I asked Enzos why all the dreams were about death. "I am Babadook, bone built of grief. Death is my companion. I am her messenger." "Do you take death nightmares to other people, or just me?" He stood silently for a moment. He was always careful in developing his words. "There is only one Cassandra for each time, each plane of existence." "Plane of existence? What are you?" "I have visited others for millennia. Now I bring you the sight. There have been many before, as there will be many after." "After what? After I die? What happened to the last one?" Empty bones somehow conveyed his sadness. "The last dream I will bring you will be of your own death, when it is time." He removed his hat, placing it somberly across his chest as he faded, and the next nightmare began. A family of 5 killed in a car accident on an icy bridge driving home from Thanksgiving dinner. Again, I showed Patrick the dream journal entry from 2 days before Thanksgiving and the story on the news website to match. He accused me of writing the story down after it happened. You're calling me a liar? I'm telling you these horrible things I dream about, and then I walk around just waiting for them to happen. Can you imagine how that feels? To know someone's going to die, and you're the only one who knows, but there's nothing you can do about it? Why the hell would I make that up? God, dramatic much? You think I'm doing this for attention? For sympathy? Either that or you're killing them yourself, and this is some kind of insanity defense, he replied with a stupid grin on his face, one I almost slapped out of existence. Or maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe that's it. Listen, Alexandra, he reached out to grab my hand, but I flung his hand away. No, I won't listen to you. You don't believe me. My own boyfriend won't even fucking believe me. You know what? Fuck you then. Patrick spread his hands as if to say, see? Get out, now. He stood up, dropping my journal on my bed. Major drama queen. Whatever, just leave. That night, Enzos brought me a dream of a school shooting. 16 students, 4 teachers, and the principal killed. 20 others injured. When I woke up, I spent an hour throwing up. I didn't bother checking to see that it was true. December was full of fires from faulty Christmas lights and one about a candle from a menorah. The week before Christmas, armed robberies of shoppers putting newly purchased gifts in their cars, and families killed in their homes for the presents under their trees. On Christmas Eve, a man who had just lost his job killed his entire family and then himself rather than face a joyless, giftless Christmas. 7 kids, his wife, and her elderly mother. After that, I stopped keeping the journal. When an unknown respiratory virus killed a dozen babies in the NICU, I burned it. I asked Enzos to stop apologizing, to just skip right into the dream. He did not speak, simply lowered his hat and his head. My parents took me to doctors and therapists when I stopped sleeping. I thought if I didn't dream, it wouldn't happen. After a few nights, I fell asleep on the couch, even though I'd used up every K-cup of coffee. The doctors found nothing wrong with me. Underweight, exhausted, stressed. They suggested melatonin, yoga, guided sleep meditation, and ironically, journaling. And they all referred me to a therapist. I didn't tell the therapists, of course, about Enzos or the dreams or the journal. I made things up, exaggerated about school stress and breaking up with Patrick. Otherwise, I would end up in some mental hospital on lithium and sleeping pills. I dropped out of college my junior year after I dreamt about a suicide on our campus. I worked as a waitress, took shifts in retail during holiday seasons. My parents were disappointed in my failure to reach my potential and wanted me to go back into therapy, but they couldn't make me. I avoided serious relationships, never spent the night. I had acquaintances at work, but no real friends. I couldn't go through the questions, and I wouldn't chance telling anyone again, not after Patrick. The night before I turned 30, Enzo spoke. This will be the last. I cried through the whole dream. Relief. It was someone else's turn to be Cassandra. Not a Dream Gift by Elizabeth Fenley. The dream deities must be pissed off. If I had to guess, Morpheus is delivering his messages in record numbers. His brother, Phoebetor, the son of darkness, is bringing more nightmares, and Mara is sitting on the chests of the sleeping to pour nightmares into sleep-cycling brains. They have to be the ones responsible, because the dreams are so palpable, so tangible, that they exude from people as they go about their normal days. I have the misfortune of reading everyone's dreams. I can't control it, and I certainly don't want it. It's like music from the car next to you at a stoplight, blasting stupid loud with the windows rolled down as if everyone wants to hear their music because they and their music are just so awesome. Personally, I believe there is an inverse proportion between music volume and intelligence. The louder the music, the dumber the person. This ability is doubly unpleasant because once the dream opens up, it brings the current thoughts as well, reading their thoughts about the dreams in addition to interpreting it. I wonder what I did a year ago to piss these dream gods and goddesses off enough to deserve this. It's been a long, alarming year, bombarded by so many dreams. The woman waiting for the crosswalk light to change dreams about her ex-husband as if they were still married. Sometimes he is as horrible in the dreams as in real life, and sometimes he is just there, a ready-made stock character representing other things. She hates it, feels like she should take a shower in extra hot water and try to scrub out her brain with bleach. The teenager who drags my groceries out of Walmart to my car dreamed about holding a baby last night, and now she's worried that the dream meant she's pregnant. She plans to steal a pregnancy test at the end of her shift. That's a good idea. She is pregnant. I never wanted this. Ability, curse, whatever it is. I wanted desperately to get rid of it, but I don't know how or even if it's possible. It's always so loud, so crowded in my head. I spend as much time as possible alone in the remote cottage I bought when this started happening. I told my therapist right away. She, of course, interpreted my interpretation of what I experienced as other people's dreams and asked why I was suddenly having these thoughts. Not helpful. I didn't tell her or anyone else about it again. I'm afraid someone will interpret my claims as hallucinations and delusions of omniscience, even paranoia. I know that would land me in an inpatient hospital with drugs and cognitive behavioral therapy, group therapy, who knows what else. I would be trapped with the dreams of the suicidal, the bipolar, the schizophrenic, and the addicts. I can't imagine what those would be like, and I don't want to. For the last year, I've just been trying to cope with it. Just cope. Just survive. But I'm tired, weary of knowing everyone else's problems. Laura, who works in the cubicle beside mine, dreams about being attacked by a dog, even though she loves dogs and grew up with them. It's the same dog every night. A familiar dog, but not her dog. She hasn't made the connection yet. She's afraid her boyfriend is cheating on her again. He is. The man in the break room pouring himself a cup of coffee, whose name I don't know, dreamt last night about being in a plane crash even though he hasn't been on a plane in years and has no upcoming travels planned. It means he's worried about projects, plans, or decisions in his life and the parts he can't control. My boss dreams that each time he opens his mouth, rotten teeth fall out. He has a vague sense that it has something to do with what he says at work, that he's an imposter and what he says is all bullshit. It is. Maybe he will have a dream that will make him stop talking bullshit. The pharmacist at the drive-through window smokes a bowl every night before she goes to sleep, and then has wild, psychedelic dreams that are just the drugs. They don't mean anything. They're just odd. She never remembers them. Ironically, I never remember my own dreams. I know I must have them because all the sleep science I have read says everyone dreams. I wake up the same way every morning, never feeling any emotional residue of dreams. Maybe it's because I have too many dreams in my head during the day from everyone else. I never stay the night with my girlfriend, at my house or hers. She doesn't understand, interprets it as a fear of intimacy. It isn't. I need to sleep without her dreams in my head. It's only a matter of time before she breaks up with me for my emotional unavailability. She tells me it's hard enough with parents who have been distantly disapproving of her lifestyle, as they put it, but she needs me to be a partner. Her straight friends and her co-workers don't quite rise to the level of bonding she needs. She doesn't spend as much time with her lesbian friends and ex-girlfriends now that we're Facebook status in a relationship. But I know that will change, and I only have to remember the patterns of my past to know that. No dream interpretations required. I spend most of my free time reading, escaping into other people's lives, people who don't interpret dreams or read minds or predict the future, people who are completely unlike me. I secretly hope the seam of the book will rip open and pull me into it and never spit me back out. Just let me live in that world without who I am in this one. Nobody would miss me. Rachel would dismiss my physical lack of availability as an illustration of my emotional unavailability, assuming I had just bailed without saying goodbye, ghosting her. I wondered how long she would wait to change her online status. My boss would wait 3 days, documenting the calls, and then let HR do the paperwork for firing me. No family left to miss me, not even a pet to depend on me. Maybe there's another solution, aside from the big permanent solution, and I haven't found it yet. I will keep looking. Maybe there's a way to appease the dream deities enough to let me escape. When people cross into my dream radar field, I will keep trying not to look, listen, interpret, know. But I know it won't work. Dreamweaver by Megan Lang. In the dust that settles at the end of the world, where the only light is the dimness of dawn, there is a woman sitting on a wooden chair. It is not a throne, she is not a queen. It is not a rocking chair, she is not a crone. It is a wooden chair you might find anywhere in the world, straight-backed and uncomfortable to sit on for long periods of time. She sits on it while she weaves with a cat sleeping lazily at her feet. There is a single flickering flame that lights her workspace, illuminating spools of thread in every imaginable color, and a large loom fashioned from the same wood as the chair. She moves the threads with practiced intention, weaving tiny lines and cells into a new tapestry. A scene is playing out on it, a couple of people who are still only feet. Their toes point together, and when she reaches their heads, they will be face to face. The weaver can hear the conversation hissing through the dust outside her door. She can see in her mind's eyes the faces of the two people. Only she is watching, and she is watching it all, weaving it as it happens. Long ago she was something else, but she has retired into quiet, comfortable obscurity far from worship and zealotry. She loves the loom, loves the dim light in her sliver of the world, loves the chair that hurts her back and her lazy cat. It is peaceful to watch scenes play out. When she finishes a tapestry, she sets it outside where it joins countless others. The colors will bleed away in time. The fibers of the scene will crumble and join the dust that swirls around her peaceful, lonely little place. Once the cat stretched and watched her work before asking in his small voice, "Do you make the scenes happen or as they happen?" She paused her work and frowned down at him. "Does it matter?" More than anything, he'd argued, but she had to disagree. The pure joy of creating something was worth more than the lives it did or did not impact. She couldn't help what she wove. Maybe she was merely mirroring what was happening somewhere out in the world, or maybe she was under the control of whoever wove her own tapestry. She'd taken up the cat because she desired minimal companionship. When she stopped to feed him or pet him, it reminded her that time was indeed moving along. Besides that, she couldn't help feeling kinship for the little beast. She admired him for wandering to the edge of time as she once had. He was brown but had been gray when he arrived, coated thick with dust, hungry but lively. Even as he laid around day after day, there was a glimmer of fire in his green eyes that never dimmed. He kept small beasts from destroying her work or making nests in her spools of thread. They got into arguments to pass the time and waxed philosophical over meals. "What makes you say that?" she asked. He was the only outsider to ever look into her little workshop and thought her ways were very strange. He claimed to recognize some of the figures in her tapestries. "From when I was a man," he said. But she doubted he was ever anything but a cat. Why else would he wander so far afield in search of someone to feed him and scratch behind his ears? If you are in control of the world, then you can change it, judge those who should have been a better or worse picture. She didn't like that. It made her fingers fumble over the fibers of her creation. It reminded her of the days when she was asked for miracles and punishments. "I don't interfere," she'd answered carefully. "Not can't, not won't, don't." Sasha awoke with a sudden start. The moonlight streaming through her window glinted off Toblerone's yellow eyes, and he was glowering at her for waking him up. She sat up and rubbed her head. It was pounding and her mouth was dry. There were crusties in the corner of her eye that felt suspiciously like dust. She picked up her phone and squinted at the bright screen. Her alarm was set for 3, and it was 2 minutes till. Groaning, she threw back her covers, much to Toblerone's dismay. He meowed his disapproval and jumped off the bed. His little bell on his collar jingled as he padded down the hallway and awaited his breakfast. Sasha packed her hamper into the too small trunk of her car and headed off for the laundromat. She passed a few other cars and had to wonder what they were doing up at that hour. The laundromat wasn't busy, but it wasn't completely abandoned either. There were 3 other cars parked, including a shiny old Mustang right in front of the entrance. A young couple was out front, smoking when she walked in. A haggard-looking woman waited beside a dryer with her son asleep on her lap. In the back corner, by her favorite washer, sat a man in an outrageous green silk coat. She smiled as she walked by to throw her clothes in. "Laundry day, huh?" she said, with a cheeky nod at his coat. He frowned at her. "What?" She swallowed. "I like your jacket." He cracked a smile and straightened the lapels. Around his neck hung 3 gold chains, and he wore about 15 rings on his fingers. He was at a certain age where he might have been 45 or he might have been 60. $50 for it. He laughed at that a little harder than she thought was appropriate, and he sounded a little nervous, too. The neons in the window cast a bluish tint over his skin, and she found her own crawling as she turned her back to him. Sasha sat a few seats away and frowned as she looked at the rows of washers in front of her. Hers was the only one running. She pulled out her phone and pretended to scroll. "Lovely fingers," he said quietly, leaning over as if they were sharing a secret. She clenched her hands into fists. "Excuse me?" she said, a little loudly, though she didn't expect any help from the mother with her sleeping son. The guy shrugged and pulled back a little. "You have nice hands. Do you ever do any knitting or sewing or anything?" His voice was oddly familiar, like she'd overheard it on the bus or at a coffee shop. Not someone she really knew, but certainly someone she'd heard before. She felt her face turning red. What a creepy attempt at flirting. Not to mention, he was at least old enough to be her dad. "What are you talking about?" "My Nana used to make blankets," he said. "You know, on a big, old-timey loom, you know?" She had the most beautiful hands, strong hands, and when she moved her fingers, it was like magic. "Can you just leave me alone?" she said finally. He frowned at her and nodded, running a hand through his thinning brown hair. Yeah, he said and cleared his throat. He looked away, but every once in a while he would start looking at her again. First just stealing glances out of the corner of his eye, but they got longer and longer. She slammed her phone down and turned to look at him. "You're making me uncomfortable," she said slowly. He was looking sheepish now, almost pained. "I don't mean to, really I don't." "Well then, can you please stop?" "It's just that—" He shook his head and ran his hand through his hair again. "Can I ask you one more thing?" Sasha glared for a moment and then sighed. "Fine. Do you make the scenes happen, or as they happen?" Her blood went ice cold. She knew where she'd heard his voice before. The smile he gave her was utterly feline. "You recognize me?" he asked hopefully. "I said you could ask one more question," Sasha said. Her heart was pounding. Maybe she was still asleep. Maybe she was still dreaming. "You can ask me one, if you want." "What the hell do you want?" she whispered. She didn't want anyone to interrupt them now. I'm as freaked as you are, okay? I thought your brain couldn't make up faces. That's a thing people say about dreams, right? You can only dream about people you've met. That isn't the weirdest part of this, she snapped. She didn't know this man, had never seen him or met him or overheard him in a coffee shop. But they'd shared a dream. Such a real-seeming dream. Do you think that makes it real? Sasha scoffed. I can't even knit. He turned his knees towards her. I thought it was my Nana, like maybe that's what she looked like when she was younger. But then I saw you when you came in, and He laughed giddily. You gotta admit this is pretty cool. Sasha still felt put off. There had to be a better explanation. But the dream had been real, and this guy was real. At least she hoped he was. Maybe the mom by the dryers hadn't said anything because Sasha was just talking to thin air. I still have it, he said quietly but excitedly. My Nana's loom. You must think I'm an idiot, she said. No way was she going anywhere with this guy, and besides, she barely knew what a loom was or how it worked. Though the dream had felt so real. In it, she'd known exactly what to do with the loom and what it meant as she wove each thread. She'd held them in her hands, felt the strings slide between her fingers. I know I put you off, but I'm not that kind of guy, really. He pointed to one of his bazillion rings and flipped his phone screen towards her. There was a picture of him with his arms around another man of indeterminate age set as the background. The two of them stood smiling in front of a Christmas tree. Sasha nodded back towards the wall of washers. Why don't you have any clothes? She asked, eyes still narrowed accusatorily. He looked sheepish again. It was a really strange dream. I just really needed to clear my head. Not much else open at this hour. She crossed her arms, still unconvinced. He sighed and took out a business card. The embossed letters read, Arlo J. Carr Ramirez, Attorney at Law, followed by a number, email, and website. She frowned at him. He just shrugged and stood up. If you change your mind. Sasha was hesitant, but she took the card. With that, he nodded at her and left. Sasha crumpled up the business card, but paused before tossing it in the wastebasket. Would it really hurt to hold on to it? At least if something else freaky happened, she would have a name and number to give to the police. She tucked it into the pocket of her sweatpants and went back to watching her laundry. Sasha stood behind the counter at the convenience store all morning in a daze. She couldn't stop thinking about Arlo and the dream. When it was slow, she watched videos of people weaving on her phone, checked out Arlo's website, and read the Wikipedia page on tapestries. Her fingers didn't feel like her own anymore by the time she finished her shift at noon. The crumpled-up business card was on the front seat of her car. It must have fallen out of her pocket that morning. Without even realizing what she was doing, she dialed the number. Weaver, Arlo answered excitedly. She almost hung up right there. How did you know it was me? Sasha demanded. He chuckled. I'm retired. I don't hand my card out to anyone, so... She was quiet for a long time. I want to see the loom. That's great. Can you bring it somewhere? It's kind of huge. When she didn't say anything else, he sighed. Where do you want to meet? The YMCA parking lot was busy for the middle of a workday, Sasha thought as she pulled in. She parked behind an empty school bus in a far corner of the lot. Arlo's old Mustang came in hot, the loom poking out of the trunk, a few haphazard bungee cords holding it in place. Her heart sank when she saw it, though. Recognized it. It looks... She shook her head as he set it out in the bright parking lot. In the dream, the workspace had been dim, but it was unmistakable. They probably all look like that, right? Like if I saw one in a movie, it would look just like that one. Arlo had a plastic bag in his hand. I stopped at the craft store on the way here, he said, and handed her a bag full of tapestry thread in a few bright colors. He went back to the trunk and produced an old wooden chair fashioned from the same wood as the loom. It was straight-backed and looked uncomfortable to sit in for long periods of time, the kind of chair you'd find anywhere in the world. "This is ridiculous," she said as he set the chair in front of the loom. She pulled out a spool of thread and ran it between her fingers. She closed her eyes and saw the workshop at the edge of the world. "Maybe it is," the cat said, "but it's worth a try, right?" Sasha opened her eyes, looking down at the blacktop, 2 pairs of feet facing each other. What if... She looked at the loom. The air felt dry and full of dust. She could smell rotting fabric on the faint wind blowing over the parking lot. When she turned back to Arlo, he was wearing that feline grin again. "Now you're wondering too, aren't you? Would she make things happen, or as they happened?" She shook her head, began to string the warp with quick, practiced motions like she'd been doing it her entire life. Like she was born weaving and had always done it and known it. "Don't you see I'm right?" the cat said. He was standing behind her, but his voice sounded like he was below her, speaking up from her feet. It doesn't matter. His voice was on the wind, telling her what he would say before he said it. She could see them sitting there. It was like she was at another car in the parking lot across from them, or in the school bus looking down at them. She could see them from every angle, the weaver and her cat.